February 27th, 2012 meeting of the Penn Board of School Directors will hereby come to order. Please rise and join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda is request to address the board. We have two requests to address the board this evening. The first is Ms. Susan File talking about seventh generation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan File, the Director of Seven Generations Charter School, and I was sent here tonight to invite you to our lottery night. It's Thursday, March 1st. You've heard about lotteries at charter schools. We finished up our enrollment timeline last week, and we have about 120 families vying for the 6 openings we have for next year. So many of you might like to come and see what that process is. And basically, other than that, we're working through Dr. Seinenberger's questions, and we're again happy to be held accountable for what we believe in and what we say we do. So we're looking forward to completing the process soon and being on your agenda some evening soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. File. The next request I have to address the board is from Mr. Garrett Rhodes of Allentown, talking about state pension underfunding.
Yes, I just wanted to bring to your attention a study I recently came across, recently done by the Commonwealth Foundation in regards to the underfunding of state pensions. According to their study, the state employment retirement system and the Pennsylvania State Educators Retirement System is currently underfunded to the tune of $1.8 billion and is projected to increase to $5.5 billion by the year 2016. The Pennsylvania State Educators Retirement System portion of that is currently $300 million and projected to increase to $1.5 billion in 2016. These are increases of 421% and 500% respectively. Now, since underfunded pensions are likely to be the focus in Harrisburg over the next 4 years, and defined benefit pension programs will need to be somehow integrated into defined contribution pension programs going forward into the future, I would ask the board, since you've recently taken a political stance on SB1 for good reason, which is concern about school choice taking money away from the district, that I would ask that you take some form of a stance on any pending legislation that may come up in the next few years regarding converting some of these funds from defined benefit pension programs to defined contribution programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Having no other requests to address the board, the next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Can I have a motion, please? Second. Is there any comment on the minutes? None appearing. Let's all say aye if we're in approval of the minutes, or nay if you're not. Aye. Aye. We're all in approval. We do not have a report from the Student Government Association, I'm informed, this evening, so we'll skip that item until the student members of the board come to make a report. We now have a presentation from Mr. Lynn Glancy regarding the 2012-13 capital projects.
People in the back see that? See the charts?
Slowly coming on.
It's coming out. last meeting, we had a comment, which I appreciate, about the timing of the hot water heater replacement on the capital reserve fund spreadsheet. And if you look on the spreadsheet, the $20,200 has been shifted to this year because it will be done before this summer. And this summer is actually the 2012-2013 year because it's after the end of this school year, June 30th. So the board will note, this was presented last week, but we made a change to correctly show when that expense is going to occur. In addition to that, and I apologize for the size of this is a large spreadsheet. Your handout should be readable just barely. So if you look, this has already also been changed. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that that number is $1,855,814. And if you look back on the first page under the 2011-2012 total at the bottom, that is the $1,855,814. So that's where those two numbers tie. The first page has the additional 2-year projections. So we projected it out 3 years on the first page and just tied it to the first year's projection on the second page. Do you have any questions on the capital reserve? Yes, sir.
What I read from your summary here from 1998 to 2012 is that in the late 90s we had approximately $5 million to start off the capital reserve, and now we're down to carrying about $1.8 million.
That is correct. But please notice that over the last several years we have tried to keep it around the 1.8.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Clancy on this set of figures for the capital reserve fund?
Okay.
Okay.
I would like to move from the capital reserve to the capital fund. And the first page of the capital project schedule starts with the number one priorities, which are at the top. And those are the priorities that we would like to schedule for the summer work. You can see that we're looking at lighting upgrades, occupancy sensors, windows. We have window repair. Unfortunately, we've had windows that have infiltrated and the seals are lost on them so that we are getting water as well as cold air in and out of the windows. So we'd like to replace the damaged windows with new and improve the envelope of our buildings, decrease the energy cost. And there's also a concern that if we leave them go long enough, one of them might fail. And that would not be acceptable at all.
Could you just highlight with some of these, some of the work that's going to be done with buildings? I know it's on the part of the audience, perhaps.
Right. McCungie would be a lighting upgrade. The high school would be occupancy sensors. The lights would be turned off automatically when there was no motion in the room for 10 to 15 minutes. We have windows at Jefferson, the pool top air conditioning unit at the high school. We're having problems right now maintaining the air quality in the pool. The chlorine level gets high. Some of the students are not able to breathe properly, so it's not a good condition. What we end up doing is opening the outside doors. Well, we're opening the outside doors during the winter. So it's not an acceptable situation there. We need to take care of that situation. Lincoln, windows again. Lower McCutcheon Middle School, we need to replace, repair windows and skylights. Occupancy sensors, again, the occupancy sensors pay for themselves in less than 2 years. So when we do this, our expectation is within a 2-year period, we will have paid for those occupancy sensors with energy savings. You see high school install lighting occupancy sensors, that's the same as above. That's supposed to be the Lower McCutcheon Middle School. So we want to try to do both middle schools with the occupancy sensors. We want to try to finish the high school because the high school is about 75% done already. And then we want to try to finish both of the middle schools with the motion detectors. Yes, ma'am.
Have the skylights at the middle school been replaced before?
The
The
skylights
skylights?
have been repaired before. When we did the building upgrade, we added a skylight, but that was through that whole project.
All right, I just thought it was, not that long ago.
We have,
Mr. Glancy,
yes,
the skylights that need to be repaired are at Lower McCungy Middle School,
correct.
so we haven't touched those since they were installed originally.
Well, we have tried, they have leaked since
leaked.
they've been installed. And so we've been back at them to try to plug the holes, repair them as well as we could. And what it looks like we have to do is actually tear them apart and reseal them and then put the frames back together again. So it's good. We haven't torn them apart yet.
So this is, we're not actually replacing them. In the case of the skylights, these are a repair.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
The rec ENGRG, that requires engineering or something?
Requires engineering, I was gonna get to that, but that's, yes. You'll see it requires engineering on 3 of these, and the intent was that those 3 and the engineering required for the capital reserve concrete and paving would be on the board agenda in 2 weeks. So we are currently getting requests for proposal from engineering firms to do those projects, and we would be bringing that cost to the board in 2 weeks so that we can start the engineering. The intent is to try to get all of that together and out for bid before May or June. Because if we wait till May or June, most of the contractors in the area will have filled their dance card. And at that point, the prices all go up. So instead of
being first.
if we can get in before that, we can expect a 5 to 15% cost reduction in those bids. But the closer we get to June, we lose that, and then we start to pay a premium after that. So it's important to get the engineering started and in process so that we're ready to bid in a timely manner.
Are there other questions for Mr. Lansing on this particular slide?
Can you explain the additional storage space?
Mr. Bacher?
The additional storage space, we have safety concerns at the high school and at one of our elementary schools. And they are storing equipment which is used on a regular basis, but they have no place to store it. And what it ends up being is a tripping hazard and a hazard for exiting the building. And so it creates an ongoing safety concern that if we can get additional storage in the proper places, that we can take care of these over-stored areas. But it does concern us that people are going to trip, run into some of these pieces of equipment, and not be able to safely exit depending on where they are in the building.
Okay, I think that's it for this page.
Sorry. Just a quick question. When we're looking at roof replacements, within 5 years, is that as of 2011, 2012, 2012, 2013?
From now.
From
so it would
now.
be it would be the 11, 12. So within 5 years of 11, 12.
They did skip ahead, and I was looking at the overall cost in 2014, 2015. And I didn't know if some of those roofs could maybe, the 2 5-year ones could be pushed.
Some of them, we believe that we can push out another year or two.
Okay.
Some of them, we believe.
The 3-year ones, I'm noticing we can't probably, but the Ignace High School one, I mean, that's a pretty penny, and
Yes.
Jefferson, so those added together is over $2 million.
And
That's kind of
since
scary.
since you're already on the second page,
Sorry.
you can see that the amount of money we have left from our bonds is $929,000. So after the Willow project was taken out of the bond total, we have the $929,659 left to do other capital projects with.
This is in addition to the capital reserve.
This, capital reserve is separate, right? This is in addition to capital reserve.
These are just funds that are available for capital projects from the bonds.
Correct. And of course, the total is the scary number. But that total doesn't have to be done in 3 years, but it will probably have to be done in 5 years. And if I only have $929,000 towards a $6,700,000 cost, at some point in the future, we need to consider borrowing the money to be able to continue with the capital program.
Or allocating money to the capital reserve
Or
through the same
allocating
process.
Right.
So through some process.
Through some process.
Questions on this sheet for Mr. Clancy? Mr. Earnshaw?
So my understanding of the leftover bond monies, with every project that we've done, we've had a contingency fund built into those in case we come up with unexpected things. And I remember on the Willow Lane project, we had a couple of unexpected things. The engineers and the architects, everybody missed the fact that we would have to extend some of our utility connections a little further than they expected. And, you know, things like that that come up. And so I'm assuming that $929,000 are primarily monies that were part of contingency funds that were not spent during the projects?
Correct, but it was also for projects that had been identified when we were borrowing the money.
Oh, that's right, because we had that
So
extra bond.
we did the $4 million borrowing. Part of that was to finish Willow. Part of that was for additional roof projects, safety projects.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? None appearing. Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Well, last slide.
Last slide.
Just the summary. This would be what we would hope to get accomplished this summer. And you can see the RFPs on the right-hand column. Those would be the engineering estimates that would be required. And I would hope to have on the agenda in 2 weeks. In addition, the one for the capital reserve. So you would actually be seeing 4 of those in 2 weeks. And then the bottom line is we're looking at spending $658,000 of the $929,000.
Mr. Earnshaw?
So these, of course, are estimates, and when we go out to bid, it's a competitive bidding process. We end up taking the lowest responsible bidder, which may be lower, maybe right on, it may be a little higher, right? So we won't actually know the final cost until we get those bids, or if we're going off of the state, what is it, the state contract?
Contract or CoStar's contract.
Right, so we do have some options there as well.
Right.
And each one of these projects will come before the board for approval before we actually do them, correct? Or do we approve them as a batch?
Some of the smaller ones will be only material, and if we can buy that on state contract and our people will do the work, the approval would be that the board doesn't have a problem with our buying the material at the cheapest cost we can find on a state contract or a CoStar's bid, and then having our people do the work, because in many of these areas, they've already done the work and are experienced doing it.
Thank you. So it's normal maintenance in other words.
Well, it's normal maintenance, but it's above the $10,000, so.
Anyone else? It's your final slide, right?
That was it. That was it.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. It's just another element that we'll have to consider during the budget process in terms of our capital reserve account. We'll now move on to the report of the superintendent of schools, Dr. Thomas Seitenberger.
I want to thank Mr. Glancy, and I want to remind the board that the projects we're talking about, the bond money's already been borrowed, we're paying back on that, and we have the capital reserve, so there is no fiscal impact on the budget. We have these funds in our possession already. But I do want to remind the board that some of the leftover monies come from the bond issue we asked the board approval about 2 years ago. And I want to remind the board, with all due respect, that we really did well in that competitive environment. I think the roof projects came in well under bid. I know that we didn't have to do as much work as we initially thought with the boilers, and we got some excellent prices there. So, as Mr. Glancy had said, we won't know until we get the bids, but so far, knock on for Mike here, we've been really doing well in this last time. And again, I want to remind the board that our strategy is based on two things right now: safety and savings. And if you look at the majority of projects, again, our intent is to continue our path to be good stewards of energy, and so we'll move on from there.
May I ask a question?
No, we don't permit audience participation. If you had an input you wanted to put, we could have you do a request to address the board.
Later?
We can do that if it's all right with the board.
I have just a simple question for the gentleman.
Fill out the form in the back and we'll get your information and get a response to you. But it's not necessarily going to occur at this meeting. We'll go ahead with your report, Dr.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mallard. Good news for the board, very briefly. Strategic plan that we passed several board meetings ago. We have received approval from the State Department, so we're in good shape with all elements of our strategic plan. If you were around the high school today and saw some interesting people hanging around the track, we had some people there from television, a show called The Doctors. They were using our facilities to tape an upcoming episode, so hopefully we get some credits for that. Want to remind everyone that kindergarten enrollment process begins March 26th. We've advertised this, and again, friends in the media, any reminders you can put in, we really appreciate it. And that, I'll remind the board, that's really a significant step for us in the budget process, because we can take a long, hard look at what number of youngsters we can anticipate next year. We always know there's going to be a gap. There will always be a gap of the kids that we registered in March and those that actually show up in September. I mean, this year, August. We wish that parents would come forward, but for some reason, there are a group of parents every year that just don't avail themselves of earlier registration. And so that also bothers us, but we have enough experience now for a long period of time to make it look at the numbers and basically look and see on average how many students we get in that active period in August, and we can make certainly a determination that I think will suit us well for staffing for next year. It's very infrequent that I talk about sportsmanship, but I really do want to say some nice things about our students, and I certainly do want to say a lot of nice things about the students from Freedom High School. Last Friday night at the Lehigh Valley Conference boys basketball championship, it was a packed house, folks. Parkland and I'm trying to think. The girls' game preceded our game, Central Catholic against Bethlehem Catholic. And so by the time most people arrived, there was very little, if any, seating. And it was so refreshing to see basically a sellout crowd in high school sports once again. But I will tell you this, that our students were well behaved, they were spirited, but so were the Freedom kids. And there, of course, was some interesting banter between the cheering sections, but it was all above board and done with good sportsmanship. And I can tell at the end of the game, the handshakes were genuine. And it's not often that we see that. So many times we get criticized, or our kids get criticized, or kids from other schools about misbehaving at public events, and this one was really good. And also, in the first round of the District 11 playoffs, we had a chance to compete against Allen, and I would say their students were well behaved on Saturday, and so were ours. And we're looking forward, of course, to Wednesday night when we play that team in black and red from the north, and hopefully our students will come out and support, and our fans will come out and support Emmaus High School against Parkland on Wednesday night. A lot of my colleagues and I, we've been starting to make our rounds to meet on an individual basis with our elected representatives. I've been contacted by Justin Simmons, and I plan to meet with him hopefully this week, if not this week, next week. I know Mr. Gross from Salisbury has been meeting with him last Friday. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Mr. Steve Samuelson, who represents voters in Northampton County. However, he's a member of the Appropriations Committee, and what I told Mr. Samuelson is the exact same information I'm providing him. I'm certainly going to give to Mr. Simmons. And the information I gave him was basically what I gave you folks the other day about unfunded mandates. And we as an IU will be releasing our cost analysis for several options regarding the payments of cyber charter schools. I want to emphasize the word cyber. Not bricks and mortar charter schools, cyber charter schools. And you know that has been an ongoing issue for many, many years. And so we spent some time explaining those charts to Mr. Samuelson. I'll be doing the same thing with Mr. Simmons. I know from contact Mr. Gross that he's very interested in this topic. And later on, I'm going to talk about the legislative meeting that's going to be happening in Lehigh County. And I certainly hope that people come prepared to that meeting to talk about costs of cyber charter schools plus other state aid. So I'm very happy that certainly in the future I'll be reaching out to Senator Brown and Senator Mensch, and if we ever get a representative, whoever that unknown person is as well. And you know, this time of year is really a huge hole not having someone you can go. It really is. You know, I mean, Mr. Reichley and I, we may not have agreed at every point, but he was always available for one-on-one meetings, and I really appreciated that from Mr. Reichley. And I'm certainly optimistic that our next representative will allow us that time as well. So that's coming up. In terms of funding and some community issues, I've been invited to be part of a panel discussion. Northampton Area Community College, March 21st. I'll be appearing with Bruce Davis, who has a radio program at Bethlehem WGPA. If you read the morning call, Mr. Davis, he is a resident of Lower Country Township and a frequent writer on mostly his hot button issue now is transportation in the state of Pennsylvania. But Mr. Davis is a man with an incredible background, and I'm honored that he's asked me to serve on a panel with himself and Malcolm Gross, another attorney from Allentown. We're going to be talking to senior citizens about tax issues, representation, Homestead Act, things like that. So March 21st at Northampton Area Community College. Mr. Davis told me there's over 80 people registered for this meeting already, so I'm excited to be part of that. I will be sending out annual letters to each of the townships, each of the municipalities, the boroughs, and asking them if they anticipate any development, any changes in the real estate atmosphere. So one of the things that Mr. Glancy, Mr. Sertable, and I are committed to is making sure that we have the most accurate revenue projections moving forward in this budget I will tell you that almost every week I talk to Mr. Fossman from Lower McCountry Township, because that seems to be where the action is at this particular point in time. But in my letter, I'll be sending out asking if they would like a one-on-one meeting. I will gladly come to their offices to sit down and to talk about if anything is on their books, either for this year or next year. And again, things look promising. We certainly want to make sure revenues reflect realistic numbers. I do want to talk a moment about the governor's budget, and I put on your places an analysis by the Educational Law Center. And I'm not going to certainly go through this page by page. It's really interesting reading if you're into potential court cases. You might want to read the last couple pages. You'll find it's very interesting, the things that are going on statewide. Of course, the Educational Law Center, when I was superintendent of New Jersey, it was the Educational Law Center that basically sued the state of New Jersey. And I'm reading these lists of things on pages 6, 7, 8, and they seem like an old friend of mine. That was a 20-year court case, the Abbott versus Burke case. And my gut, I know there's been some, I wasn't in Pennsylvania when school funding was last challenged in some Supreme Court cases, but just by reading this and becoming more aware of the funding inequalities throughout the state, I wouldn't be surprised if someone doesn't file a suit in the future, especially if you're in one of the districts that's in financial turmoil, or some of the districts that are financially strapped. These numbers certainly look like there are basic inequalities. And I think the last time we talked about the governor's budget, there are a lot of unknowns, but some things are coming out, and I do want to highlight, and again, don't necessarily have all the answers, but here's some of the things that are being honed in statewide. And I think the more we deal with this, the clearer it's going to become. Number one, the first thing is, this is not a formula-driven budget. And that is, I think, driving the most concern statewide, in that the governor's budget is based on a series of assumptions that have nothing to do with the formula. I mean, obviously, in my meetings with the individual legislatures, and I hope with yours when you advocate, we ought to be recommending to the governor that there ought to be some formula-driven education funding. It works best when everyone knows what the rules are. The second item is we're starting to sense that there could be some issues with the new Social Security payments. We're starting to sense that some of the data may be based on data 2 years ago. And what we're all concerned about, and I think it doesn't matter if you're Lehigh County, Northampton County, Northumberland, Chester County, a lot of school districts in Pennsylvania cut staff last year. And we don't know if those staff cuts are represented in numbers. We think they may not be, and therefore what has been stated in some of the spreadsheets that you saw may not be. And then when you commingle Social Security aid that's not formula driven, and then throw in transportation aid, this is where I think the nervousness comes in, because let's just say the next year or two we have some new developments, a lot of kids move in, and our transportation costs zoom. Our greatest fear is that he's going to use this student achievement grant as a baseline data, and for years with transportation we would get an automatic an increase if our transportation costs go up. But we're worried is that he's going to use this as a flat baseline, and since the money's commingled, we might have a spike in transportation costs. At the same time, who knows if it's really our basic education funding that's being affected or not. And I think that's when we talk to our legislators, I think more than asking for more money, we ought to ask for a formula and have those things clearly spelled out so we can interpret those to our boards of education and to our taxpayers. The current governor's proposal certainly is not clear, doesn't have the clarity that we would like to see it have. So those are the kind of things that we really need to work on and press our legislators with over a period of time. And certainly our main concern, I spent a lot of time with Mr. Samuelson, I will spend the same amount of time with Mr. Simmons, is special ed funding. And this is a major issue. We've been held harmless, which means we didn't lose any money, but we certainly didn't increase any money in special ed. The charts I passed out, we certainly gave to Mr. Samuelson. We showed him, we talked about extraordinary aid. We'll talk the same thing with the other representatives. And so we really need to push. I did notice that there's a Senate bill in play that speaks to special ed funding, but it makes me nervous. Some of the things in there I'm not so sure that would be in our best interest, Mr. Ballard, and I think you're going to probably report on that at some point. So we'll have to keep our eye on that legislation as well, because that particular Senate bill reserves allows the PD to hold back some of the money. That's certainly not what we need at this point. Also, I put on your place an announcement. Throughout Pennsylvania, in the last year, there's been a lot of grassroots activism going on. And we've seen great success throughout the state. Chester County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, Allegheny County, districts like Cumberland Valley, Mechanicsburg, starting to form parent groups, basically to intensify lobbying on behalf of public education with elected representatives. So with that in mind, the League of Women Voters will be sponsoring a legislative forum for the public on March 8th at 7 p.m. It will be facilitated by the League of Women Voters, but all of our elected representatives in Lehigh County and Northampton County, or anyone who represents school districts in Lehigh County will be invited to participate, and it'll be the chance for the community to interact with our local legislatures on the issue of educational funding. So this notice will go up on our website tomorrow. We've already asked our parent advisory committee see if there's anyone from that group that would be willing to serve on a planning board with other parents from other school districts throughout the county. So we're very excited about this group. We are working with some other activist groups in the state who have had great success. And by the way, this is nonpartisan. It's nonpartisan. I want to make that very clear. This is all about public education. And it's an opportunity for our legislators to come out and, in essence, face parents and tell us what their plans are for funding public education in Pennsylvania. So we certainly are hopeful that we get a decent crowd out that night. Again, March 8th, Lehigh County, L-Tri-C, 7 o'clock. I also, there's an agenda item. I certainly want to thank the Rotary Club for their donation of $1,000 to Lincoln. That's really nice of them. Mrs. Zatnell, really appreciate that. And all the wonderful activities I gave you last week, copy of our students involved in civic activities, that's now on our website for people to look. And I want to finish, you know, when you lose a student in the district, it's always a traumatic event. And you all certainly know about the young man, Ben Albrow, who unfortunately passed away not too long ago. But I received a, gotta compose myself here for a moment. I received a beautiful letter from his pastor just today, and he wanted to thank all of us really in the East Penn extended family for the wonderful performances that our Emmaus High School Chamber Strings and did at the funeral services, and the wonderful manner in which our students and our parents showed respect. And comfort and offered comfort to the Albro family. So I certainly want to thank all those people from our staff. And we did make our facility available last week. The family just did not have a space big enough to host fellow mourners and those seeking to offer family comfort. So we sponsored that Penn High School cafeteria last week. These things are always hard to deal with, but at least in this case, this was a wonderful young man, and I think he was remembered in the most appropriate manner. Thank you, Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Dr. Seidenberger. Are there any questions for Dr. Seidenberger on his presentation? None appearing. There's a typo on the agenda. There's a motion without a number, the acceptance of donation. We'll call that 3, and the approval of the Northeast Educational Intermediate Unit 4. Is there anybody who have an objection to moving items 2, 3, and 4 together?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? None appearing. Ms. Birdsall, will you call a roll, please?
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller. Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
8 ayes.
The next item is on facilities, approval of Plan Con K. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions on this motion? Ms. Sanchez?
I have a question on the disposition of funds. I know we've seen this before, but it occurred to me, I just wanted to ask, I see like the roads and, is it called sign-in, is $34,500, and their expenses, it comes to like $36,833. Do we bid out on those services?
I'm trying to find the page.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's, not really numbered.
Page.
That's a legal fee according to the solicitor. That's not something that you bid out.
Okay. Is that the same for like PFM? I know they're wonderful and all that, but would we ever bid out on their services? No.
Professional services are not required to be bid out.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your statement. I apologize.
Any other questions? Ms. Birdsall, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller. Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Well, there's so many areas I could go into in legislative, which is the next item on here, but I've chosen a singular topic for tonight because I know that our fiscal office is going to be bombarded in the next few days because everybody in Lehigh County probably today received a letter saying that their assessment had been changed for their house. And if you got the letter, it gave you a bare amount of information saying what your current 1991 assessed value was at 50%. What that 100, they multiplied it by 2 for you and told you what the 100% value would have been in 1991. And then they gave you the 2013 preliminary assessed value at 100%, which is supposed to represent the new market value at 100% of your home as the county has reassessed it. Now, to get further information, they gave you a web address which you could go to. And if you put in the control ID, which they had on the top of the form, you could get a nice little printout. I know I can't show this here and I can't project it, but it has a nice little picture of a drive-by of my house, and it has the current owner, the current address, the city, state, and zip, the tax authority in the school district. It gives a value for the taxable land and the taxable building and the preliminary assessed value. And then what it does is say taxes. And it doesn't explain on the page that that is taxes at the current tax rates, not any new tax rates, but just taxes at the current rate, which is last year's rate. And it gives you your current county, school, municipality, and a total value of your taxes. And tonight, 55%, I understand, of the people in Lehigh County are cheering because their taxes went down, and 45% are cursing because their taxes went up. And it has nothing to do with the East Penn School District. That's the first thing I want to say. We don't get any actual revenue increase from this, and we're not getting more taxes from everybody. Some people's taxes went down and other people's taxes went up to levelize the assessed valuation in the county. So if you had a house that hasn't sold, like mine hasn't since 1982, and was last appraised in 1991, and you're now in 2012, you will probably, unless you're in a very distressed area, find that your assessed valuation has gone up. And if your assessed valuation has gone up, it is pretty certain that your taxes will have gone up also. Now, if you purchased a house after 1991, when they did the last reassessment, and you have a market value based on, say in the year 2000, and then they come along to 2012 and do an assessment and the number is lower, you are liable to find that your taxes have decreased. So there are winners and there are losers in this particular game, and again, the school district has nothing to do with it. However, since they list the school taxes, which are the largest part of your tax bill, at least in most places, and that number may have gone up for a lot of people, the county very conveniently put a contact list on the website for every municipality and every school district in the county. And in our case, the poor unfortunate Debbie Sertibal, our business office, not only her personal email address at the school district, but her direct phone number was put in there for people to call when we have no control over anything that's on any of these forms. So the first thing I want to point out to people is that there's what's called an informal appeal procedure that you can sign up for either by mail or by going on the website and checking off on a form and saying you want to appeal your assessment. This is an informal process. It will simply be a series of meetings to be held sometime later. They didn't give it any dates. That you will sit down with an assessor and try to argue your case about why you don't think your assessment is correct. And it doesn't require any court hearings or any formal filings, but you do have to have some kind of information with you to justify your position. And that has to be done to get on the informal process by March 16th. It's not that far away. It is a little under 3 weeks, I believe. So anyone who gets one of these things should be, and thinks that they have a major problem with the way the assessment's done, they need to get in on that formal appeal process. And I want to remind people about that because it's very important. And one of the things you'll be looking at, like I am, is the basic residential profile that's on this web form. And it has things like square feet. And they have a calculation, and they have a picture that purports to show their calculation of your square feet. Unfortunately, one of the issues I raised with the county just today was I can't add the numbers up on their picture and come up with the number of square feet that they have listed on the form. And they don't have any explanation on that. So I've asked the county executive to get some more information on the website about how some of these calculations are done so people can look at them. And there are other curious things. I have a bi-level house, and if anybody knows what a bi-level house is, it's the house on 2 levels built on a slab. And they say I have a full basement. I don't know, maybe there's a bunker down there that I have. It could be just a terminology that they're using the bottom floor as quote like a basement to get the square feet or something like that, but anyway, that kind of stuff is not explained on the site. So there are going to be a lot of questions, and there are going to be a lot of people doing the questioning. So it's good to get in your assessment informal appeal right away if you suspect a major thing. But let me give you another piece of information that you might be able to use. There are several sites out there, and I'm not recommending any one, but one that I use when I'm trying to look at my neighborhood is a site called Zillow. zillow.com. And it's one of many sites out there. I'm not giving a personal recommendation, I just say I use it. And you can go out there and you can put your address in, and it gives you what it thinks are the current comparable values for your area. And in my case, the preliminary assessed value on the county's site and Zillow's number, which by the way has dropped considerably since the year 2007, according to the chart they also gave me, was within $2,000. So that kind of indicates that there's some other independent information you can use to see. If you see some of these sites or you get an appraisal from a real estate person that says that you're way off in the value of your home, that's the kind of information you can take to the county assessor's informal hearings and attempt to do it. If you see the square feet is off by a significant amount, that's another kind of piece of information you can use. But I caution people, you've got to have some basis, because essentially this is a countywide look at all of the values and to normalize everything to what it would be if everybody purchased their house this month, for example. That's the kind of idea that it's behind there. And so you have to have some basis for saying that whatever assessment they've come up with for your house is wrong. But if there is a basis, I would suggest you get in on that informal appeals process. This change in your assessed value does not come into play until the 2013 tax year. So this year's taxes are not going to be affected by it, but next year's taxes are. And so you've got to be aware of that, and it's a countywide thing. And again, in big, bold letters, the school district had nothing to do with it. And I will also say that the way the things are done is, once they do the assessed values, they readjust our millage to get the exact same amount of money for that amount of real estate as we got before, within a certain percentage that we're allowed to by Act 1 to raise for the 2013 year. So it is not a windfall for the school district, and the people whose taxes are being raised, we're not out there gouging you. The problem is that your assessed value has changed. The county has changed everybody's assessed values to normalize them. Newer houses are probably going to drop, and older houses are probably going to climb. And in that line, I also want to remind senior citizens that the East Penn School District is one of the few in the state that has a senior citizens tax rebate program. And we will double anything, essentially, that you can get from the state under the same program. And you can get the forms at tax assessors, tax offices, at your representatives' offices. From the school district, call up the business office, they can send you a form. You can apply if you meet the criteria. I believe it's under $35,000. Mr. Nancy?
I'm not quite sure what the one thing is.
I think that's a new number, but if your income is below $35,000, you can apply for this program and get a rebate and from the state. And you also send the same forms to the school district, and you can get, the school district will kick back the same amount of money as the state does. So you get twice. And that's one of the few school districts in the state that does that to help our senior citizens with their tax bills. So I urge senior citizens to get in on that program. We have, what, about 280 that did it last year?
The number keeps going up every year.
Number keeps going up as people learn about it. That program is in existence. Get in it now, because, again, your 2013 tax bill, based on this county information, I'll tell you now, my taxes went up, okay? And I didn't do it. And I don't want to do it, but my taxes went up according to the county. So please get that information out to as many people as possible, people you talk to, your neighbors and whatever. Again, the important thing is, if you want to get on the informal process, you'll have a chance later to do the formal appeal process if you can't get satisfaction on the informal process. But I'll tell you that the informal process will probably accept more dicey information than the formal process will when you have to go for a formal legal hearing. So if you have some anecdotal information about how much your neighbors have sold for or something like that, that might have more bearing in an informal process than it will in a formal process where you probably have to have an appraisal. So get in on the informal process as soon as you can if you have a problem with your tax bill. And again, don't blame us. Again, the legislators are out doing their thing, and we'll see what else they're going to do to us.
Mr. Ballard, I believe that the East Penn tax rebate information is available on the district website. So you don't have to go anywhere, just go home and download it.
Okay, Mr. Earnshaw.
This is probably a good time for Ms. Sertable to either call in sick or hide under, she did. Hide under a blanket in her office. No, but seriously, she may want to change her voicemail message to explain some of these factors to hopefully reduce the number of messages that are left. We may want to get some kind of information out on the district's website, maybe have a prepared statement that she can send by email when people send her questions. Like Mr. Ballard said, she's probably going to get inundated. It would be great if we could help avoid her being pulled away from all the other things she's working on.
You mean like the budget?
Among other things, yes.
We're getting those calls already.
We got them last week. Fourth of those.
Okay, is there any other questions on the legislative arena? Mr. Stoltz.
Might not have mentioned this except for the fact that Dr. Steinberger touched on it earlier. My understanding is that in order for there to be a special election to fill the 134th State House seat, the Speaker would have had to have made that determination by Friday, correct?
Yes. There is a lawsuit on that regard right at the moment, too.
I was aware of it, but it looks at the moment like they're going to have to do a special election sometime after the primary.
Yes, and it costs taxpayers more money.
That was my next point that I was going to make. If anyone has a problem with this, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it at this point legally, but they should probably call Speaker Sam Smith's office and voice their displeasure with his, I suppose, leadership. A point that should also be made is there are 5 seats right now that are unrepresented, and the Republicans, of course, have the majority anyway, but it's my personal belief, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, that he made the calculation that, well, since 4 of them are heavily Democrat, we'll take the extra buffer rather than give the people the representation they deserve. Speaker Smith is certainly no, Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Well, I won't go into comments of motivation. All I know is that we were unrepresented at this particular point, and we should have had a special election at the time of the primary, so that we didn't have to go through extra expense for the taxpayers. Are there any other
Some
questions?
fiscal conservatism.
All right, we're now into business operations. Does anybody have an objection to putting items 1, 2, and 3 together?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on any of the items? None appearing. Ms. Birdsell, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Stoltz?
Aye.
Ms. Hyde?
Aye.
Mr. Earnshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes?
Aye.
Mrs. Donchez?
Aye.
Ms. Fuller? Mr. Bacher?
Aye.
Mr. Ballard?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Okay. I do have this one request to address the board. Would it be sufficient just to give you a copy of this handout?
Wonderful.
Okay. And just for future reference, anything that's presented to the board then becomes public information. You can request it from the district office the next day, and we'll send it to you either by email or mail, depending on what your
Thank you very much.
request is. But it's not public, basically, until it's been presented to the board, because it's pre-decisional information. So, you got a copy there, Ms. Birdsell?
I do.
So we'll get you a copy. We have an extra copy here tonight.
That's terrific service, thank you.
All right, are there any new business to come before the board this evening? Mr. Stoltz?
2 items. They should be pretty quick. This acceptance of donation, thank you to the Rotary Club for that, it's appreciated. Should we have voted to accept Ms. Donchez's reimbursement for her PSBA conference that she attended, which I thank her for, by the way, and I'm sure the taxpayers do as well.
We're having a discussion right now about the policy because it is unclear.
Okay.
That's why there was a motion on tonight, because state law is not legal settled on this particular thing, and we're going to have a discussion on whether that policy in general needs to be revised.
All right, that was my first point. My second is, last time we discussed the neighborhood improvement zone and how it would affect East Penn taxpayers and us. My understanding is that that causes East Penn taxpayer dollars to go towards the neighborhood improvement zone in Allentown, correct?
Well, we're still trying to get our hands around that because the money is certainly sequestered, and at best, it will be a 9 to 12 month or more delay in getting the money that is earned by residents of East Penn who work in the neighborhood improvement zone. There are claims being bandied about that that money will not be used, it will simply be there in case, but we don't know that yet. But it certainly will be delayed at least 9 months, which is approximately saying that we won't be able to count on it in our 2013 budget.
Mr. Stoltz, Mr. Ballard, the board, we did receive an EMA letter late this afternoon, and I haven't had a chance to talk about the contents with Mr. Glancy and Mrs. Sertolo, but I will gladly forward that letter to you. That is what's the word I'm looking for, a compilation of the meeting that certain representatives had with Senator Brown and some other folks last week. That was reported in the paper, I think, the other day. But that'll give you the latest information and some breakdowns, and I think
There's information from the Lehigh Tax Collection Committee that he's referring to that we'll
Yeah.
send on. We won't have all the answers.
but it'll give you the latest from the meeting. And I think the townships and the boroughs, thank goodness, are leading this charge, not necessarily the school districts.
But the Lehigh Tax Committee has sent a list of questions to Allentown and answers on them. And part of the answer they got back is that Allentown doesn't know some of the answers till later, but we're working on getting more information.
One of the things I think a big question for us is, can either Berkheimer or Keystone go in and give us a really good estimate of how much money we're actually talking about for each taxing entity? That would be of interest to us, obviously. So my understanding is they're working on that.
It was my understanding that there was a municipality within the East Penn School District that actually passed a resolution similar to the one that we did, sort of expressing their displeasure at this move by the legislature. Last night I wrote up a quick resolution, which I will happily distribute to my fellow board members here. I have some extra copies if anyone else is interested. Caught a small wording error, but resolved that the East Penn School Board expresses its displeasure with our representatives in the legislature in Harrisburg who sponsored and supported the legislation that would cause East Penn taxpayer dollars to be used for the Allentown Neighborhood Improvement Zone. I so resolve.
Before we go on a second, is it possible that we can have this on our next meeting so people have a chance to
I would have no problem with
look
that.
at it?
But
Perhaps we need some wordsmithing on.
yeah, there was that little, and now if we have some questions as to the use of the taxpayer dollars, that would be fine, but I have, like I said,
I'm not trying to stifle your motion, I'm just trying
No,
to
no,
give
that's-
everybody the best chance to look at it.
I don't particularly have a problem with that, putting it on the next.
Would that be all right with the rest of the board, that we put this on the agenda for the next meeting?
Could I make a comment about it though, or no?
I suppose.
It's interesting that Mr. Stoltzberg, brings this up. I did go to a Lower Macungie Township meeting last week, and the board there, the commissioners, made a similar recommendation. They all voted to direct the manager, I believe it was, to express his displeasure. So I would support this. So to make that comment that others are doing it, as you said, leading the charge, and it would be nice to be part of that charge.
There's a lot of stuff out there, we just have to make sure that the language is appropriate for what we can do. So we'll put this on the agenda for
I have no
next
problem
meeting,
with that.
under legislative. Is there any other new business to come before the board? None appearing, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, yes, that's right, we covered everything. Yeah, we covered personnel, confidentiality, real estate, and litigation. So we covered the clear,
Almost all.
except employees. So we covered all of those bases in a clear session that was held before this meeting. Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.